Welcome to App Talk with Upptic, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of how to grow apps and games. We speak with industry experts about specific strategies, tools, and tactics they use to find success, and we keep you up to date with emerging news and trends in the ever-changing games, marketing, and technology ecosystem. My name is Xander Acosta, Director of Marketing here at Upptic, and joining me today are my co-host,
Warren Woodward, co-founder of Upptic.
And our guest,
Quinn Campbell, VP of Growth at Sky Mavis.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Quinn, friend of the pod, and very excited to have you.
Yeah, really pumped to be here.
Quinn has been on our wish list. We've been working with him and the team closely. One of our favorite people in Web3 and gaming space in general, and also being a trooper in what is like the dead of night that you're joining us today, right?
It's not too bad. I appreciate it though, Warren. Yeah, really, really excited we could make this happen.
I'm honestly surprised it took us as long as we did to get Axie on the podcast.
Well, we had to wait for the right moment, and we think a cool moment is coming up in Axie's future. So let's go for it.
Yeah. So one quick plug at the top: we have our Web3 Games Growth webinar on October 2nd at 8:30 a.m. PST. As a reminder of who's on the webinar, in case you haven't heard it so far, we have Jeff Zerlin, co-founder of Axie Infinity, Yusuf, and I apologize for this, Gulambas, CTO of Animoca Brands, and Megan McWilliams, COO of Arrivant. So there'll be a link in the show notes. Please subscribe or register for that, and yeah, should be good. Cool. So our first section is Industry Insights, where we do a deep dive on industry news, a few articles to cover, some spicy stuff. So just jump right in. The first one we will cover is a fact sheet from whitehouse.gov entitled White House Releases First Ever Comprehensive Framework for Responsible Development of Digital Assets. So this one's a mouthful, and I'll sort of just go through it piece by piece, and we can talk about it a little bit. It's basically in 7 parts, and I'm just going to go through them each really briefly. So the first one is protecting consumer, investors, and business. So these are like headers that describe what the agencies and the federal government is doing to address the various components of cryptocurrency as the federal government sees it. The first one is protecting consumer, investors, and business. And basically what they're saying is existing agencies, do your job, but include crypto in it now. So basically, the various financial agencies and the government just like continue doing everything you're doing, but think about crypto now. Then there's the second one, which is promoting access to safe, affordable financial system. And this one's a little bit interesting. It talked about crypto a little bit, but one thing that really jumped out to me is that they have a product that's supposed to be releasing in 2023 called FedNow, which is a 24/7 clearing system for banks. And they're basically saying that, you guys are talking about crypto, and that's like maybe important, we'll see. But more importantly, we have the Federal Reserve transaction system, and that's what you should really be paying attention to. The next one is fostering financial stability. And this one's a little bit interesting. Basically says use existing departments like Treasury to monitor various digital assets, and they talk about stable coins here, so that's a little bit interesting. Just to quickly go through the rest of these, reinforcing our global financial leadership, basically use DOJ, state, treasury, and commerce to enforce U.S. norms globally, fight illicit finance. They basically expand they are saying, hey, DOJ and other financial systems, you use your existing statutes of limitations, but expand them to crypto. And finally, and the interesting thing there, they talk about Lazarus Group, which is the North Korean hacking group that attacked Axie. So maybe we can dig into that. And the last, and I think they sort of bury the lead every time they talk about this, is exploring a U.S. central digital currency. And basically what they're saying is, hey, Federal Reserve, think about whether or not we should digitalize the U.S. dollar. So that was a lot of stuff I sort of just threw out there. Any thoughts about what this could potentially mean? I mean, either one of you?
I mean, maybe start out just clarifying what this is and what this isn't. This is not law. This is not regulation. This is like the committee that's recommending making a committee about something else, or our recommendation is that it's a series of recommendations basically and suggestions. It doesn't seem like there's any. This could be an indicator of like where the wind may blow on some of these topics, but it's not. There's nothing that materially affects anyone who's in the Web3 or crypto space today. That's my read and understanding of it. I mean, Quinn, I assume you and the team at Sky Mavis have been keeping an eye on this framework. What's your take on the impact, and specifically the impact for Web3 gaming?
Yeah, I don't think we've really kind of put a priority right on like figuring out what this level of impact is quite yet, because it's so high level at this point too, right? But I think there's kind of like 2 competing reactions to it, and one is like, wow, this is really cool, it's a cool kind of check to be getting this kind of attention, right? Just for crypto in general. But at the same time, like, you know, it is a little bit nerve-wracking to think, you know, how are central governments going to try to interpret some of the work that we are doing, and how will things get a little bit more difficult for us to kind of work in this space. But ultimately, we do need to have something, right? It's been said, like, people from the outside looking in might think that there's not an adult in the room in Web3. Right. And so, you know, we do need to build something that makes the situation very comfortable for everybody in the space and everybody looking in. And if we're going to bring in, you know, hundreds of millions, that's the step in the direction I think we need to go.
Yeah, and to that point of, you know, kind of the sector maturing, one way it's matured is we have lobbyists now, which was not a thing in Web3 and crypto a couple of years ago. So I won't, please fact check me on this, guys, but I want to say that Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX, et cetera, I believe he's like the single biggest contributor to either the DNC or to in Biden's re-election campaign. I should probably spot check myself on this, but very serious lobbying is now coming from the segment as well too, which, you know, on principle, like, lobbying is not a great thing, but at the same time, if you have you know, all of your opponents or opposing forces that are lobbying and you don't have a fighter in the arena, then you know, that kind of seals the fate for that sector.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was doing a big DNC push. I know he was trying to get some specific senators elected. So, I mean, maybe that's a component of it. I think the, like, sort of the key takeaway here is really just the fact that the US government seems to be embracing this in the short term and potentially in the long term. And I mean, that's good. I mean, you could have the opposite direction where you have someone like China that just say no crypto. And I don't think that's going to work long term, but in the short term, it is definitely going to throw a wrench in their development of that ecosystem. And I think, you know, the US government saying, hey, we like finance, we like innovation, it's going to keep us ahead. It's the right it's the right thing for us to do. So I mean, that was sort of the throughput is basically just like, keep doing what you're doing, but now with crypto. Like, that's basically
just to fact check myself, I just pulled it up. The thing I was trying to quote was Sam Bankman-Fried was the second largest donor to Biden's election campaign.
That helps. Cool. Let's move on to the next topic. Warren, want to take this one? It's a spicy one.
This is a really interesting one. So I think Eric Seufert on Twitter called this out initially. So AppLovin has launched a Web3 platform wallet? Question mark?
Something. Yeah.
Marketplace. But this is super interesting. It's called Vessel. And we were ribbing them a bit on Twitter because their logo is a bit similar to Upptic. I think it's just coincidence, just having fun. But what is this? I think there's a lot of interesting implications of this app that has kind of appeared with not a lot of fanfare. So Vessel is an app and platform that allows users to trade, sell, and manage NFTs without ever needing to leave your application. This is from their site. We handle the entire blockchain stack, so you can focus on building the best apps out there. Our all-in-one solution offers the following: NFT creation and management, NFT marketplace and wallet app, on-ramp, off-ramp payment processing for 200 plus countries and 25 currencies, and advanced reporting and user management capabilities. So my hot take, and Quinn, we know you have a background in traditional mobile gaming, is this almost seems like max ads for Web3 of trying to be you know, a infrastructure that you know, that games can come to Web3 on. So I do want to get you guys comments, but I want to give a little more context on the product for the listeners. There's also part of this, they have a currency, kind of, called Vessel Coin. So from their own FAQ, Vessel Coin is a new digital asset created by Open Vessel. Built on blockchain technology, Vessel Coin can be purchased, earned, and redeemed for cash within the Vessel platform. Vessel Coin is not a traditional cryptocurrency. We are selling virtual currency, which can only be redeemed for cash on our platform. Our token exists on the blockchain as a proof of record, not a store of value. So it seems to be very careful language that they're using. The conversion rate for Vessel to fiat is one Vessel is 1 cent USD. So it's essentially a stable coin that's not exactly a stable coin. So this is the information we know. As a spoiler, I'm going to cover this a little bit more in my app of the week at the end, just sort of like the user experience. But guys, what do you think about this initiative from AppLovin?
It's this one. I kind of deep dive this one a little bit, right? It's really interesting to me. And first of all, did you guys see any PR release around this at all?
No.
I think I just saw it
Yeah.
from the Sufrit post. Like, I don't think we would have found it otherwise.
No, and that's interesting to me because that makes me question whether this is like overt or they're kind of sneaking by. But what sticks out to me the most is that this seems to be purpose built for passing App Store review, right? It's really powerful.
Yes.
If you look through the FAQ section, especially, right? So Vessel Coin is not a token; it's in-game gold. It's the most standard like IAP store that you can have. Convert fiat to in-game token, in-game currency, and then use that currency to make your purchases. So that's very, palatable to Apple. And so therefore, obviously, it can't be removed from the app. Price doesn't fluctuate. It's just like, gems or gold. They also use Apple single sign-on, which I've been told is a really powerful unlock for passing App Store review.
Makes sense.
Yep. And they have super, super clean return policies right on the homepage of their app. And that's one of the biggest things that I've bumped up against, Warren. I think you know it as well in our discussions with Apple, which is how can you handle returns on the blockchain? And, if you're not actually using real tokens and if you own your own blockchain and just kind of build in your own return policy, which is what Vessel's done, then that's how you do it. And then the other thing that sticks out as well is they KYC every single user. So the only part that I'm still a little bit unclear on is the fact that you can cash back out at the end. But my guess is that it's basically just eBay. Like it's just a marketplace. The NFTs that you can own, I'm guessing, I haven't really experienced it yet, but I'm guessing that there's no way to actually work them, right? There's no way to generate yield off of them. There's nothing that you can do to add value or decrease value to the NFTs. It's purely just, a digital asset that you can sell on a marketplace. I don't know. Warren,
the NFTs are tied to the games on the platform. But I have not gone deep enough to actually see like the functionality in the games to know if they have a material impact on gameplay or if they're just a skin. So I think that's something to explore next. But
Can you transfer them out? Can you transfer them out to other wallets?
No, because they have their own Vessel blockchain as well. I don't know if it's called Vessel, but they have their own blockchain. So everything is kind of stuck within this ecosystem.
So this is just like blockchain without the blockchain, right? Like
it is blockchain. Like it generates a crypto address for you, a blockchain address for you when you sign up. It's writing transactions to that blockchain when you do interactions.
Right, without all the functionality of the blockchain. Sorry, like
I may have misspoken, Xander. You can sell it to another wallet on the same blockchain, in that sense. But yeah, this is an interesting one.
I mean, I'm sort of two minds. It seems like they're taking all the benefits to the consumer that you get from the blockchain, sort of like the core reason why you'd want a blockchain, and getting rid of it, right? And saying instead of having something that you can own and pass around and do whatever you want with and have a free and open ecosystem, we're going to have it centralized within our ecosystem. So
I would push back against that a little bit, because there's this is an argument in the Web3 a lot, is like, what is actually the value of Web3 technology? Like I know folks deeper in the space, such as myself and assuming Quinn, care a lot about some of the principles around decentralization and things like that. But if you just boil down to like, what is the functionality that you can add to an app or a game, I think that, to AppLovin's credit, they are boiling down and making, to Quinn's point, a very compliant app tailor-made around current policy to enable apps to leverage some of the just sort of practical ways that you can use blockchain and ownable assets to enhance your product, but setting aside sort of like the values and aspirations of Web3 as a platform. But the functionality is there, I think.
Okay, but what part of this needs to be on the blockchain, right? So they're just saying, hey, you can buy into the ecosystem and take it back out. I mean, this is just skills, right? This is just an ecosystem where you can earn points and get, it might as well be in a database. I guess that's sort of the point I'm making, is there's nothing, because it's not interoperable in any meaningful way, and they take a tax every time you take it out. And also it's not actual store of value. It's just, like a ledger.
But, this was their first to market for a lot of these things. That's what's super fascinating about this. As Quinn mentioned, a lot of why some of the leading Web3 games like Axie aren't, available yesterday on the large platforms is trying to be in compliance with the policies. And that's not an easy task for such a nascent space. One important note is if you look at the name of the app, it's Vessel NFT Wallet. And we do know that there's special carve-outs in the App Store for the wallet category. So they're positioning this as a wallet, but it's actually like it's OpenSea, it's Netflix gaming, because it's a whole store for like showcasing and downloading apps. And there's all this additional functionality. I mean, even OpenSea, you can't buy and sell NFTs in their app, you can only view. So they have this rich functionality of a whole platform that they're carving into their, positioning as a wallet, so they can kind of get the carve outs that Apple has around
It's a
wallet
brilliant
policy.
call out.
Yeah.
What happened to no
Really,
app
really
stores
big
within the
fan.
App Store, right? That used to be that is a policy. That's standard policy. It's current policy.
It's the same as Netflix. So it's
Which
is
is if
a
you're big
store.
enough. If you're big enough, it's fine.
Well, it pushes them back to the store. You're not
Right.
you're not downloading directly from Vessel. It's just it looks like a store, app store, and when you click get, it redirects you to the Apple Store. And fascinating.
I'll say a couple things. I bought Apple in stock yesterday when I saw this. More of it. I hold Apple in stock, and I bought more of it when I saw this. I was like, oh, Jesus. Okay, let's do. I've been really bullish on the team for a very long time. I think this is going to be a fairly successful product, and I think that they're going to be able to flex or go to market muscle that they have across all their other product lines to make this really successful. And I'm very bullish on the company, but I think the issue with AppLovin is always just how aggressive they are and how they really centralize value within their own ecosystem and away from everybody else. And I think that you just always, whenever this company does anything, you need to keep an eye on that. That's all.
Yeah, I'd say it's both exciting and scary. But anything that moves adoption forward and moves the policy conversation forward with the platforms, at the end of the day, I'm for.
Cool. Let's go
What's
to the next
next?
article. We're running a little long. I'll do this one really quick. It's called Upcoming Price and Tax Changes in Apps and In-App Purchases from Apple Developer, like apple.com. As early as October 5th, 2022, prices of apps and in-app purchases, excluding auto-renew subscriptions in the App Store, will increase in Chile, Egypt, Japan, Malaysia, Pakistan, Poland, South Korea, Sweden, Vietnam, and all territories in using Euro currency. There's a price chart that we can include. Basically, what this is Apple adjusting their prices in non-US denominated territories where they're seeing a lot of revenue, and we know they have price power and they're flexing that price power. One of the other interesting things is in Vietnam, this might be relevant to you, Quinn, they are passing through the value-added tax that Vietnam just passed in their legislature to the consumers in Vietnam. So yeah, I mean, this isn't surprising. I think it's more of Apple being Apple and saying, hey, we're a closed ecosystem, we run the world, we're going to do what we want to do, and you guys are going to pay for it. But curious if you guys have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'll pass the mic to Quinn here. I mean, I know a lot of Axie's current player base is in some of these territories affected by these policy changes. Do you expect any material impact from this, Quinn, as you guys move forward with more mobile accessibility?
I don't think we do yet, but I don't think it's something we've really stopped to think about either.
Yeah, fair enough.
Cool. We don't need to focus on this, but just wanted to call it out. Want to move to the next one?
Yeah, and this is just super fast. I think this has been covered to death in mainstream gaming press, but we did want to just cover, the huge hack for GTA 6 that happened recently, linking to an article from Tech Radar. Just, TLDR, huge details about GTA 6 were revealed. They think it's the same individual that potentially hacked Uber a while back. And, we're going to link to a Tech Radar article. One poll quote, while the situation is a terrible one for all involved, we now have a huge amount of information on GTA 6 we didn't have before: gunplay, weapons, general gameplay, settings, locations, protagonists, and more. Although footage is said to be from an early build, a lot of the leaked content could be subject to change, especially taking into account a planned 2024 release. So this is arguably the biggest game leak as far as like the amount of content and kind of size of the game. You guys have any hot takes? Do you think there will be a material impact to GTA 6 when it comes out from this?
It's great marketing. I'm stoked. Let's get it. I can't wait. Any thoughts, Quinn?
Brilliant. No, I'm with you on that. Yeah, it's I think it's just hyping everybody up even more, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it
saw
does
some.
have the vibe of like seeing your Christmas presents in the closet before Christmas, you know. I'm intentionally like not looking at it. And
Yeah, I think someone pointed out that it's a better way to call this is instead of GTA 6, this is GTA Online 2, and I really think that's probably
Mm.
what this is. Like, this is going to be an MMORPG as much as anything else. And I mean, good for them. Rockstar
I'm here
are
for
genius.
that.
Yeah, Rockstar are geniuses. All their products are amazing. I can't wait. That's all I'll say. Cool. Well, let's move on to our main topic, where we'll do a deep dive into play to earn and how that is sort of transitioning in the modern era to what do you call play to own, free to play. We'll talk about that whole everything here. So just really quick, Quinn, do you want to talk about your background, your background, and explain Axie to the uninitiated?
Yeah, for sure. So before I joined Axie, I was originally working in, traditional mobile games publishing, for like this, really big French publisher, Voodoo. I'm sure all your viewers know it. And I think what I loved about publishing is like, every game dev's dream is to ship a game, right? And I think the really cool thing about hyper casual is most of the game devs are like 24-year-olds in their mom's basement. And so, I'm just doing my job and I'm getting to make kids' dreams come true. And that was the coolest thing in the world. But around like 8 or 9 months into my time there, I started taking a closer look at all of our publishing contracts. And I realized that on every game we ship, we as the middleman would co-opt like 80% of the revenue off the game. And the game dev who ideated, built, and actually launched their game was taking home 20%. I was just immediately disenchanted with all of traditional games publishing, right? And I like to point out, like, that's not a knock on Voodoo, the company I was at. It's just more a knock on like the system that was created in Web2. And so I knew there had to be something better out there. As right around that time, I came across NFT gaming, I came across Axie, and really I came across Mavis Hub, which is like how we distribute. And this idea of taking the middleman out and just direct the community to distribution just stuck with me. And I knew I had to be a part of it. And so it all kind of spun from there. And that's how I ended up at Axie and in NFT gaming, right? And so I think for the what is Axie side of things, Axie is like this really kind of cute, lovable, but fierce world of these digital pets, right? It kind of harkens back to Pokemon, especially like for people of our generation. And these Axies, like, they love to battle each other in the arena. And so it's this card battler gameplay where, every kind of trainer, if you will, gets a team of 3 Axies. Each Axie has all of these different abilities that makes them so unique. And you just hit the arena and really kind of battle against your friends.
That's great, Quinn. I wonder if you can, so, I'm part of the masses that, my intro to Web3 gaming was also through Axie. I discovered at the same time as a lot of the rest of the world in a huge boom period prior to you joining the team. Before kind of pivoting to the future, I was wondering if you can just give us sort of like a crash course in the history of Axie, kind of leading up to, including that big boom period to the current day, and then we'll pivot from there to kind of the next era of Axie.
Absolutely, yeah. So in the earliest days, right, and I credit Jeff Jiho, one of the co-founders, with this so much. It was this massive kind of concierge white glove onboarding experience, and I think that's so important whenever you're launching a Web3 project. And I say this all the time, but in Web2, when you launch something, your goal is to find your first 1 million paying users. In Web3, when you launch something, your goal is to find your first 10,000 co-owners of your network, and they truly are your co-owners. And I think that's what Jeff did this incredible job of building. And so we got this kind of really powerful foundation of users on board, which then led into this just beautiful growth hack. And this was this whole scholarship model, which I'm sure a lot of people read about. But what kind of happened was, because Axie actually tokenized the in-game token, which is SLP, right? In a standard game, you win gold or gems. In Axie, when you win, you're awarded SLP. Because we tokenized that, suddenly, instead of it being locked within a game, that SLP could then be obviously taken out of the game, even taken back to a DEX, taken back to Binance, and converted back to fiat currency. So suddenly this whole ecosystem of guilds and scholars arose, where these guilds were these companies that were built within Axie, and they were hiring scholars, almost 3 or like 2.5 million of them at one point. And these scholars were coming in and basically using teams of Axies to work almost 9 to 5 within Axie Infinity, earn SLP, and then take that SLP back out, convert it back to fiat, split some part of it with their guild, and use the rest to put food on the table. So it's this really, really cool model where millions of people were putting food on the table playing Axie Infinity, and it was a really beautiful thing for a while, and turned into this massive growth hack, which I think we've seen kind of copied a couple times over now with apps like Steppen as well.
Great,
and
thanks.
so that's how you get play to earn, right? So you guys sort of like accidentally invented play to earn.
That's exactly right. And what I think is the most cool part about it is we actually weren't even, it was really the community who actually created it, right? Like the very first liquidity pool that appeared for SLP on Sushi Swap, or it might have been Pancake Swap, was a community created liquidity pool. It wasn't even us. And then it all just kind of spun from there.
Gotcha. And just without getting too in the weeds for people outside the Web3 space, can you quickly
definitely
concept of liquidity pool?
Yes. So a DEX is a decentralized exchange. It's comparable to Coinbase, except it's like, the very Web3 decentralized version of it. And the way that it works is instead of like Coinbase having massive pockets of Bitcoin for anybody to come and, exchange in and out of, on a DEX, a whole bunch of users all come in and all supply little bits of, Bitcoin or SLP to provide another wallet so that other people can come and exchange in and out of that. And we call that group the liquidity pool.
Cool. Yeah, kind of like a community-owned baby bank that lets you swap the token for different things. Cool. So thank you for that crash course. And I think another really interesting reflection on that era and the big boom of Axie is unintentionally Axie set a model that we see most other Web3 games coming to market are copying, which is the idea of like a governance token and an in-game token. And for Axie, that was AXS and SLP. But meanwhile, I mean, I think it's safe to say Axie learned a lot from that kind of crazy spike in growth, and the team for some time now has been building the next version of Axie, which is Axie Infinity Origins, which is the next big initiative. So next, could you just kind of talk to us about the and now this is like Quinn is joining the team. It's preparing for this pivot to Origins. So can you speak a little bit to the learnings coming out of that boom era and how that has informed Axie Infinity Origins and what's different about that product?
Yeah, so even at the highest level, right, Axie Infinity Origins is this like really beautiful refresh of the game. So like the art is all new, the animations are more powerful, but the onboarding has this massive unlock as well. So that's really easy to pick up, and even more powerful than Classic, which is what we're calling the older version, is that Origins now has free to play. Because obviously the hardest part of getting into a Web3 game is actually having to learn Web3 in the process. And so our whole goal with Origins is to have a game that can go live on an app store, and anybody, right? Like my mom who plays Candy Crush can just go to the app store, find Origins, click download, and start playing immediately, just like she would any other free-to-play experience. So now Axie becomes accessible to the masses. And then from that point, we start working on this conversion problem to bring them into NFT players.
Right. So now for the average player that's not in Web3, they can just play Axie. It's just a game. And then if you decide you want to go down the rabbit hole and learn about ownable assets and how that can affect gameplay, it's a choice. It's not a core requirement to start having fun.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's important to us that Origins free to play stands alone as like a really strong free to play game, right? And I think that's a cool stamp for Sky Mavis as a game studio as well, to say like, hey, we actually can build a really sticky gameplay experience, and it is actually really, really fun to play without any of the Web3 portion. The one edit I'll make though is yes, it's a choice, but I think that's up to us at Sky Mavis to like really recommend and convince people. It's this educational process, and then to also convince people as to why owning your own assets in a gameplay just becomes so much more of a powerful experience than just playing free to play does.
To present that value proposition.
Exactly.
So one of the I guess criticisms of the original Axie was sort of the way that the economy worked, and basically it was drawn in comparison to like a Ponzi scheme. Basically, you need more SLP to create more Axies to get more SLP, and the theory was basically that there's no end to that cycle, and it's an inflationary cycle. Can you talk a little bit about the struggles with that economy and how the weight of a bajillion users sort of was a struggle to Axie? And then how does the free to play component, how are you thinking about the economy in the context of transitioning to this new game economy, the traditional economy, as you transition to this new game economy?
Right. So the prior build, right, it was very much growth driven, the way that it had kind of worked out, right? The economic flywheel in Classic was win SLP, right? Battle in arena, win, get awarded SLP, use the SLP to breed your Axies to create more Axies. And then, you can sell those Axies, more players can come in and kind of go from there, right? Or create a new build that you think is even more competitive to win even more SLP, and it just, right, it spins like that. If it had been kind of contained and the SLP actually wasn't removed from the game, it would have kind of worked as it was built. But because SLP can be removed, we had a massive swath of players who were kind of extractive, right? They were playing the game in order to extract SLP from the game. I mean, in traditional terms, right, that's actually kind of like LTV negative. And that's what really, really crashed the economy and led to this like unsustainable growth thing.
Right.
And so there's been a couple pivots coming. Yeah, sorry, Warren.
Oh no, I was just going to comment, like that's sort of like the big challenge for Web3 games is like, because you have the option to remove the in-game currency from the ecosystem, it's the burden on the game and the game design team to make it the fun of keeping your funds in the ecosystem to advance, to get more diverse gameplay, to make that more compelling than selling it outside of the ecosystem for $1 or whatever it's worth. And that's the challenge that exists in additional complexity to a Web3 game that you don't have in a traditional free-to-play game.
One approach that we're taking is to give players more places to spend that SLP in game. So it's not only breeding now, but like there's vertical progression on your Axies. You can buy in-game cosmetics, you can buy stickers and emotes and stuff like that as well. And we're working on a lot more of these almost sinks for SLP, right? But we know, like even from traditional games, like isn't it like a marshmallow skin in Fortnite is like the best selling in-game asset of all time. Like we know people like to spend on this stuff for internet flex or for even just like personalizing their own experience. Like it matters to people. We just haven't given them enough opportunity to do so in Axie before. We have runes and charms as well. And these crafting mechanics have also become a sink for SLP. And we're seeing that be really powerful too. People like are really enjoying this crafting aspect of it. But the other piece also is actually shifting slightly the persona that we're going after.
Yeah.
Right. We want to be very deliberate about not going after these kind of extractive players and just going after people who are coming into Axie for the fun of it and are like more likely to actually kind of leave their SLP in game and do more crafting or buy emotes.
Yeah, and that's actually been a lot of the fun of working with you and the team on building the strategy for bringing Axie to a mainstream market is like what is the right messaging to achieve that goal and to attract the right kind of player? Because if your messaging is, oh, play this and make money, you're going to attract a profile that wants to come in and do that. Not saying that there won't be the opportunity for someone to have like a ROI positive experience in any Web3 game, but if you just position it as like for Axie or for any promising Web3 game, hey, this is a fun ass game and you can do a bunch of cool stuff you couldn't do before because of these Lego pieces of Web3 and ownable digital assets. And just focusing on that in the messaging and new ways to position Axie it has been like a fun part of the challenge of getting ready to bring Origins to market.
Yeah, we talk about it internally, like from a DAU, from a growth perspective, like play to earn is so powerful. And it's so snackable and immediately understandable and kind of grabbing. But it's about nailing what's next. The play to own is performing really well, and we're liking that one a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I mean, yeah, we've been juggling different types of the word salad as an industry, but it's super interesting too. Like I've said this before on the pod, but like once you start playing games where you just get something you get to keep, like separate it from value, you just get like, hey, I own this thing, I can do what I want with it. It really kind of affects your perspective of playing games where you don't have that. I've found it like hard to I don't get the same level of like, it feels like just like a time black hole when I invest time in a game where like I kind of have nothing to show for it. I mean, obviously there's fun, but it's like another level of satisfaction of like, I got this little trophy, or I got this way that I was able to, I now own this thing that signifies like what I accomplished in the game. It's a great hook for game design.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. And I think it plays into something just like more visceral with all of us. We just like to own our own stuff. It's there's just something powerful around that. And we now have the technology to allow for that in the digital space.
I'd like to explore with you a little bit of the difference in tactics. I mean, you have experience on both ends. How does growing a game in the first era of Axie, growing within a existing Web3 and new Web3 adoption audience, how does that differ from trying to bring? Because I think the vision is to bring Axie to like tens of millions of players, right?
That's right.
How do these strategies differ? From your perspective and the team's perspective?
Well, now that we have free to play in Origins, I think it's a very different approach than what worked before for growing that free to play segment, for bringing like the fun of Axie Infinity to everybody. I think we'll rely much more heavily on performance marketing, traditional UA for that, so that we can really fill up like this like bank of players in free to play who are enjoying it. Then the really interesting thing is converting them over to being NFT players, right? Like free to NFT is kind of like free to paid in traditional. And the thesis right now for us is that it's just a CRM problem. And so we're actually in the process of like beefing up our CRM capabilities. And I think it's going to be a real grind of figuring out like what package of educational curriculum across what channels when is best for actually having that unlock moment that I think, everybody here has been through when it comes to NFT gaming.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see like as Axie is pivoting to attempt to be like a just a game, not a Web3 game first and foremost, but a game that utilizes technology. I see you guys kind of leaning heavier into some of the tropes of like hardcore traditional games, like doing IRL events like AxieCon, leaning heavier into esports, starting to grow, approach traditional performance marketing tactics for like large scale growth. What have been some of the early learnings as you start testing some of those waters, with things like AxieCon, with esports, with dipping a toe in traditional user acquisition, and like how is it similar from some of the traditional games you've worked on, and what's like really different from expectations so far?
I think I might answer this in a way you're not quite expecting. I think the biggest learning has actually been an internal thing, and it's like actually it's tracking, right? And proper attribution, which has not just been so important for the conversations that we have around like UA, but we want to actually be able to really track like every activation that we're having, which I think most traditional games are able to do, but it's not something that is really going on much at all in Web3. And so we're really trying to figure this out. And I have conversations all the time with people who are like reaching out to like pitch some new activation or some new kind of growth project they're working on. And on one hand, it's really cool to say like, okay, but we need to have proper attribution and tracking on this. And it's always like, oh, wow, no one else is thinking about that. How do you suggest we do it? But then the answer is like, well, we don't know how to do it yet either. And so there's a lot of really figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, can confirm. It's for being such a new and cutting edge industry, it functions a lot like really old school gaming and a lot of the current marketing practices, like big brand gaming. And yeah, it's been extremely painful, as Quinn can attest, but we're hoping to see like a lot of dividends and just sort of the efficacy of marketing efforts. It's a grind to like figure out how to measure an ecosystem as complex as Axie, because like if we look down the road with where the product will likely go, there's probably gonna be some combination of maybe traditional in-app purchase, obviously on-chain revenue, maybe ad revenue. Well, this is not saying anything will happen. Like there's different types of revenue that can interact in different ways. You can have a peer-to-peer marketplace. You can have traditional in-game purchases. Okay, I spent $1. Like, what's my return on that dollar in marketing? Like, it's a very basic question that's insanely hard to answer. Yeah, with all the
I mean, right? We're collecting. There'll be IAPs. There will be marketplace fees. There will be breeding fees, right? But then it gets even weirder as well, because like I talked about liquidity pools earlier. Like we have our own exchange, and what if we pay for someone, we buy a user, they don't actually spend anything on IAPs, but they actually become like a power user supporting our exchange and adding tokens to that kind of community bank we talked about. Well, we're taking fees off that, and that definitely generates a lot of revenue for our ecosystem, right? But like we need the entire approach to calculating ROAS, I think, and the formula for it, we're going to be defining here in Web3, and it'll be different than what it was in Web2.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess the next thing I want to talk about there's a few components to this, but I really want to talk about the perception of Web3 games as they exist today and how you get them to a place where it's more positive. And one of the things that's been most interesting to me, have you been following Limit Break at all? That company, it's the old
bit.
Machine Zone guys.
Yeah.
Something happened where they announced that company, and all of a sudden, everyone in the mobile space decided that Web3 was cool. I'm curious if you a couple part question. I'm curious if you follow that at all, and what your thoughts are about what do they call it, free to own, which is basically just free mints. But then how, I think more broadly, how do you bridge that to saying to get mainstream adoption for Web3 from like a psychological perspective?
Yeah, so the free to own thing, I almost just feels like he's claiming something that kind of already exists.
Agreed.
Yeah. Jeff actually calls it like ownership marketing, and I think that one's interesting too. We've seen a ton of power with just like gifting, right? In some of the earliest days too, you know, we would gift, I wasn't around then, right? But we would gift rare assets to some of the like most hardcore users and most evangelistic people. And I think there's something really similar to that as well. There's really interesting questions around like how powerful that becomes on the back end and whether that actually supports, you know, strong secondary markets or not. But nonetheless, didn't he raise like $200 million for almost entirely for marketing or something like that?
Well, it's unclear what they're going to use it for. He said he's going to use it mostly for marketing on Twitter. But I think mostly this is VCs chasing people with known track records for, you know, making really big messages.
It is kind of insane though that they raised 200 million pre-product. Machine Zone, the whole company sold for 300 million after having, you know, arguably the two largest games in the market for a number of years.
Well, and it's interesting. They've like spun that story really well, where it was worth several billion at its peak, but then somehow like they made an issue with their economy and then it crashed. And they really like, I feel like Machine Zone is really, the perception of it is when it was dominating mobile space, and like regardless of the fact that they ended up incinerating a lot of user value or VC value, people don't feel like kind of forgot about that part.
So on that same topic of you know, kind of the branding of free to play, free to own, play to own, you know, insert word salad, like one of the things, you know, a big thing that just happened was the Ethereum merge. And while a lot of games are not built directly on Ethereum, you know, a lot of these gaming focused blockchains or sidechains, layer twos, like Polygon, like Ronin, there's still a base of Ethereum. And one of the biggest, I think, good faith critiques of the space was the environmental impact. That's essentially gone now. But there's still a lot of stigma and like a branding and messaging issue that Web3 gaming has. Quinn, what do you think? I guess this will be our last question. What do you see as Axie's role and potential ability to, you know, fight this kind of like messaging war and address some of the stigma in attached to Web3 games?
Well, what I think is so beautiful about something like Axie is like it can almost just be even a Trojan horse for Web3. And I think I really believe that like the winning approach to onboarding onto Web3 for like your average normie is to just not even almost talk about like the tools, right? Like people actually probably don't even care what an NFT is at the end of the day. Like we just have to kind of do a better job of like selling what the new value that it brings to people. And there's actually like I don't know if you guys watch much football, but like there's this like Patrick Mahomes commercial on Sundays now. The NFL is doing some new NFT thing, but they're just like referring to it as owning moments. Like they never actually mention NFT anywhere in that commercial. And I think that's exactly the kind of messaging that we're really like as a space going to have to start pushing.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like that classic marketing philosophy of like you want to sell benefits, not features. And that's by talking so much about the features of Web3, it's like just people are like, it's a net negative. Like people are tired of hearing about it. Like just show them something cool they can actually do with it.
Right.
Yeah, it's also just not like a very clear, like what the word NFT is just non-fungible token. It's just confusing to a layperson. Cool. I mean, so I think we want to wrap up here around the main section. So is there any, what's like sort of the last key takeaway about where Axie's been and where Axie's going for the audience? And also, when can they get it? No, I'm just joking.
That's what I'm excited about. Very soon. I think sit tight there. I think, I'm just most excited about really having this really unlocked, like mobile distribution unlocked for global launch. And that's not too
Yeah.
far from now. And I think that'll be huge for the whole space.
Yeah, it's gonna be a game changer. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, Quinn. Really appreciate it. Very interesting topic. We'll pivot to our last section, which is app of the week. We'll start with Warren. Warren, do you have an app this week?
Yeah, it looks like we both have wallets this week, Xander. I looked at the Cliff Notes. So my app of the week was just Vessel. I mean, that's what I was messing around with. So we talked about it a lot up top. Just a few more thoughts on it. Yeah, you can go shopping for NFTs. You can use them in the games, in their store. All of these games are also standalone apps. And it really looks like, a company that we're good friends with is Stardust. It actually looks like this is trying to be maybe a direct competitor
I
to
was thinking
some
that
of
too. Yeah.
Stardust offerings for, plug and play to give Web3 functionality within an existing game. And their market is kind of current game developers. But yeah, it's arguably already one of the more mature kind of infrastructure, quote unquote, plug and play things that people can use. And you can, when you start experimenting with the app, things click together and you start understanding how this can be integrated into traditional games. So I'm going to be watching that a lot. I spent $2 already. You're welcome, AppLovin. So I own $1.40 worth of their token. But yeah, that's my app.
Quinn, do you have an app this week?
I wanted to talk about Vessel as well, so I apologize for how lame that is.
We could just talk about it more.
I'm just so impressed with what they built. I said it at the top. It was purpose built to pass review. I'm sure of it, and I think there's a lot of learnings for Axie and greater Web3 for how to get something across.
Cool, Xander, what do you got?
So I'm officially out of apps. So I'm just moving down the list of less and less things, interesting things to do.
Xander has used all the apps.
I've used all the apps. So the one I'm going to talk about is Apple Wallet, which I think is another one of those things that just sort of slides under the radar and we never think about, but is actually incredibly useful. So the reason I thought about this is because I went to Dave Chappelle show last night and I realized how easy it is to just the way that ticketing has worked has completely changed, and I've never thought I never stopped to think about it. Basically, I pay for a ticket, I click a couple buttons, it adds my Apple Wallet, I walk up to the show, they tap my phone, and I'm in, and I don't even think about it. And I think just at the highest level, it's just another example of Apple using their ubiquity to expand their usefulness over and over again. And at what point does Apple and the iPhone become less important? It's got to be like when you get a brain plug-in, right? Like until that happens, there's I don't see how this device becomes less ubiquitous in the modern ecosystem.
Where it just becomes about the software rather than the device.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, what Apple Wallet does is it's so deeply integrated into the hardware, you can't it is one. The user experience is one with the hardware. Right. So no one, there can't be a competitor to Apple Wallet, really. I mean, maybe I guess it could be, but the use case is so compelling that why would you ever use anything else?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the stickiness of Apple's products, it's safe to say that I will probably die without migrating out of the Apple ecosystem, because when I think about how many hooks it has in me, how much of my day-to-day is tied to the ecosystem. I mean, is there a stickier product in the world?
Your Tesla? I mean, no, right? It's not even close. It's not. That's
Yeah.
what the thing I can think about, but it's not even close, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Quinn, I'm really happy to finally have you on the podcast and get a chance to talk about these interesting topics. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, I'm sure you got plenty of people trying to get a hold of you, but if anyone else wants to get a hold of you, or if they want to learn more about Axie Infinity or the upcoming Origins launch, how can they do that?
I think best way to reach out is Twitter. It's smooch_Axie. And then best way to learn more about Axie launch is also just Axie Infinity on Twitter, @Axie Infinity.
Awesome. Warren, take us out.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Quinn. This was one of my favorite conversations so far, and it's nice to kind of talk openly about a lot of the challenges we've been working on together over the last year.
Yeah, this was a blast. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. So as always, podcast is brought to you by the fine folks at Upptic. Here at Upptic, we do all things gaming growth, both the services side around user acquisition, creative development, and analytics, and then also our tools and platform for measuring the efficacy and streamlining these workflows. So if you want to know more about any of that stuff, we always love talking to game teams, both traditional gaming and Web3. You can reach us at upptic.com. That's upptic.com.
Talk soon.